As you know, wheels have recently become mandatory for certification in India, and tires have already been mandatory for some time. Both require the BIS certification. Tires, however, will in the future additionally have to be certified by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and marked with the Energy Efficiency label. Both certifications, i.e. BIS for wheels and BEE for tires, are relatively new, and there is still some need for clarification from the industry. And in response to the many questions and concerns of manufacturers, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency and the Bureau of Indian Standards have both published further explanations on the corresponding certifications for wheels and tires at the end of December and the beginning of January, respectively. These are the subject of this video. Okay, let me start with the explanations of BIS for wheels. Until now, it was said that in a series of similar wheel types, i.e. a model family, only 2 to 3 individual modules of the entire family, with perhaps many more variants, had to be tested. When exactly 2 variants fall under one model family and thus have to be tested has so far only been defined on the basis of the material, namely iron or aluminum, and the use, namely motorway or short distances. However, these definition criteria have now been expanded. Now, the thickness of the material and the size of the mounting holes are also taken into account. This means that what was once one family according to the previous definition could now become several different model families, which all have to be certified separately and thus also tested separately. Additionally, all variants within one model family now have to be tested, although the individual modules can probably be tested in annual rotation. So whether this ultimately leads to a higher workload and additional costs depends on the variability within a product family. Okay, let's now get to the news on the B certification regarding tires. These are somewhat more extensive. First of all, B certification is currently still voluntary, and the government announcement only says that it will soon become mandatory for tires. In other words, the concrete date from which the certification must be available for imports has not yet been set. We assume that this is because in the past, the dates for a new certification obligation to come into effect have very often been postponed several times after the initial announcement. So, by remaining vague in the very first place, the government now wants to avoid such a back and forth. This means, however, that if you produce tires and they are not yet B certified, you should start the certification process soon anyway to avoid delivery failures once the certification does finally become mandatory. There is one advantage, though, that you have if you start now with a voluntary certification. The cost of marking is waived for up to 1 year after the certification is done, as long as you start when the certification is still voluntary. Because usually you have to buy labels directly from the authority, from the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, for 1 Indian rupee each and then mark the products with them. So with this exemption, the Bureau wants to make this voluntary certification more attractive. So if you apply for a voluntary certification now, and in the meantime the certification becomes mandatory before you receive your certificate, the marking fees will still be waived for 1 year after you finally receive the certificate. There are a few other clarifications. In this Schedule 30, which was published on December 14th last year, technical requirements for tires have been further clarified in addition to the previous provisions provided in the related standard and the product manual. For example, concrete limit values for rolling resistance and wet grip, as well as new test report format, have been specified. Any manufacturer who does not comply with the values stated therein on a permanent basis will first have their B license revoked, and secondly, even face fines of up to 12,000 euros under the Energy Conservation Act of 2001 for one-off infringements, and 140 euros for each additional day that the infringement is not rectified. If you would like to obtain copies of said documents, just drop us an email and we will share them with you. Furthermore, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency would also like to provide clarity on the form of the application. as many applications were probably prepared untidily or incorrectly, which of course makes processing more difficult. Either the documents were not sorted properly or they were not stamped and signed correctly, or sometimes not even stamped at all. To avoid such disorder in the future, the BEE now has specified the order and the numbering of the documents. Now, remember, BEE certification actually consists of two separate registrations. First is the manufacturer's registration, and only in the second step do you actually register the product. So anyway, for the first manufacturer registration, the documents that I'm about to list below must be correctly stamped, neatly bound together in the original form, and from now on sorted in this specific order. Number one is a formal cover letter, the format for which we can provide to you. Number two is the proof of payment for the manufacturer registration, which we can also do for you. Number three is a stamped printout of the manufacturer's company registration. Number four, in case of the voluntary certification, which currently is only possible, a contract between the bureau and the label user, hence the manufacturer, with a precise definition of the paper type and the marking. Last but not least, number five is actually a set of various partially optional documents. A, for example, would be trademark registrations that the manufacturer might have. B would be ISO or similar management system certification, like ISO 9000 or 14000. C would be a signature authorization, usually from the managing director to the quality manager, if applicable. And D would be the BIS certificate, either according to IS 15627, IS 15633, or IS 15636, depending on the specific tire type. And all of the above mentioned documents must first be signed and stamped, then scanned and uploaded to the BEE online portal, and then at the end sent to the bureau in the original, neatly filed together. Okay, now we get to step two, the actual product certification. For this purpose, another set of documents must also be prepared as mentioned above and in the following order. Number one is again a formal cover letter, the format of which we of course again can provide you with. Number two is proof of payment, which of course we will also take care of this in case you do the certification with us. Number three is the printed and stamped online application form. Number four are the corresponding application forms depending on whether registration is compulsory or voluntary, because these are two different forms. Number five are valid test reports of all models to be registered with all test values in the corresponding format, which again you will receive from us. Important here, in the case of model families, i.e. several product variants that are to be combined in one certificate, the corresponding family definition must be clearly presented with each individual model number and their various differences. By the way, test reports produced in-house can also be accepted, but only if the test laboratory is accredited according to ISO 17025 by ILAC. Okay, number six, finally, a sample label can be toolside or a sticker for each model together with the application for each model must be attached to the overall application. All right, with this, we reached the end of this video. I hope that the information provided here helps you in your preparations for entering the Indian market with your automotive products. Of course, as always, you can ask any questions you may have. You will find the relevant contact forms on our website. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you every success.